Linda lived here in this green house in the University District along with five other university students. She was last seen here Thursday evening about 12 o'clock.
The room was very neat. There was no signs of foul play in the room except some blood in the pillow and head area on the sheets of Linda's bed. The only curious thing there is Linda's bed was made up neatly.
According to her roommate, her alarm went off on time Friday morning at 5:30. But her roommate says Linda wasn't in her room and she never showed up for work.
It's January 1974. The horror film The Exorcist is playing at movie theatres, and the song The Way We Were by Barbra Streisand is at the top of the Billboard charts. Stock markets are witnessing a severe downturn, and gas prices have risen sharply due to OPEC's ongoing oil embargo. Inflation is rising, and gas stations are rationing their supplies due to shortages. In Seattle, Washington, a 27-year-old law student named Theodore Bundy is rapidly slipping into darkness. His short stint as a political aide has come to an end, and he is now collecting unemployment and skipping classes. His girlfriend, Liz Cloffer, has noticed a stark change in his personality. He appears distant and often goes missing for days at a time. She suspects that he is cheating. However, the truth is far worse. Liz has no idea that her boyfriend has had violent sexual fantasies since his teenage years. He is also a voyeur who likes to get drunk and prowl around the streets at night. Up until recently, he had shadowed women from afar and peered through bedroom windows. This deviant behaviour continued to escalate until January 4th, 1974, when he brutally attacked his first known victim, Karen Sparks, while she lay sleeping in her basement apartment. Although Sparks survived the assault, she suffered permanent brain damage, partial hearing loss, and partial vision loss. She remained unconscious for 10 days and spent 1 month in the hospital with a smashed skull and a split bladder. Bundy left during the attack for reasons unknown. One theory is that he became spooked after he heard his victim's housemate talking in his sleep. Another possibility is that his vehicle was at home and he didn't have the means to take her from the house. Regardless of what happened, one thing remains very clear. Bundy had crossed the point of no return. His fantasies had now become a physical reality. Although he may have promised himself that he would never do such a thing again, it would only be a matter of weeks before the same urges resurfaced. This time, however, he reasoned that he would learn from his mistakes and do things differently. This time, he would do things right. On the evening of January 31st, 1974, Linda Ann Healy and her roommates went to a popular dive bar called Dante's Tavern in the University District of Seattle. The group ordered 2 pitchers of beer but did not stay out late, as their friend had to catch an early bus back to his place. Healy was also due to be up at 5:30 the following morning for work. At around 9:30 p.m, they left Dante's and walked back to their house on 12th Avenue, which was just around the corner. It would have taken them roughly 5 minutes to reach the house. Later that evening, one of Healy's roommates thought that she saw a shadow moving outside one of the windows. However, at the time, she presumed that it was just her imagination. Shortly before midnight, Healy had a chat with one of her roommates. She then said goodnight before walking down to her bedroom in the basement. This was the last time that anyone saw her alive. The following morning, one of Healy's roommates heard her alarm clock ringing out. When they walked into the bedroom to investigate, they saw that the bed was made and that everything appeared normal. Thinking she had left early for work, they switched the alarm off and went about their morning routine. Not long after, Healy's boss called the house. They wanted to know why she had failed to show up at work. Healy worked for Northwest Ski Reports in Seattle. Each morning, she would cycle to the radio station and announce the weather forecast for ski resorts around Washington. Her failure to show up at work caused immediate concern, as she was normally a punctual person. Following the call, her roommates checked her room again. At that point, they noticed that her bicycle was still present and that the side door leading down to the bedroom had been unlocked. Her clothes were also gone, suggesting she had gotten dressed and left. In their minds, it did not make sense for her to leave early without her bicycle and then fail to show up at work. There were also a number of other small details that seemed odd. 1. Healy never made her bed on the days when she left early for work. 2. Before leaving, she always opened her curtains so that her plants would have sunlight. However, on this occasion, they were still closed. 3. Healy's coat and wallet were still in the room. For a while, her roommates waited around, hoping that she'd suddenly appear with some kind of excuse to explain her bizarre absence. Sadly, that moment never came. When hours passed and there was still no sign of Healy, they decided that it was time to tell her family. Although the police were immediately contacted, it took some convincing before they treated the disappearance seriously. The patrol officers who responded to the initial call suspected that she had gone to visit a boyfriend or left for some other personal reason. When a detective finally agreed to visit the house later that evening, her roommates led him down to Healy's room in the basement. At the time, everything appeared to be normal. However, when he pulled the bedsheets away, he saw blood on the pillow and mattress. Moments later, he looked inside the closet and found a nightgown that Healy had worn to bed. It had bloodstains around the collar area. From the offset, it appeared as though someone had crept into the house in the middle of the night and attacked Healy while she slept. Then, before abducting her, he had seemingly dressed her and made her bed. The lack of leads in Healy's case stumped the police, and the investigation quickly stalled. In the 5 months that followed, a disturbing pattern emerged as young co-eds began to disappear across the Pacific Northwest at an alarming rate. During this period, 4 young women named Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, and Georgianne Hawkins went missing from their respective college campuses. A 22-year-old called Brenda Ball also disappeared from a dive bar in Burien. At the time, the police had almost no experience with serial killers. As a result, they began looking at far-fetched theories involving zodiac signs and possible ties to the occult. Things came to a head in July when an unidentified man calling himself Ted abducted 2 women from Lake Sammamish on the same day. By that point, it had become clear that someone was targeting young women in Washington state. However, the authorities were hindered by the fact that none of the victims' bodies had been found. That changed on September 6, 1974, when 2 grouse hunters happened across the skeletal remains of Janice Ott and Denise Naslund in a wooded area on the outskirts of Issaquah. This proved that the elusive man calling himself Ted was abducting women and killing them. Despite the discovery at Issaquah, the whereabouts of Healy and the other 5 women remained a mystery. Roughly 6 months later, in March of 1975, 2 forestry students decided to do a college project in these woods near Taylor Mountain off Washington State Route 18. As they were walking along one of the trails, one of the students noticed a skull lying among the damp, moss-covered trees. When the police and volunteers conducted a search of the area, they found 2 more skulls and a lower jawbone. The skulls belonged to Ball, Rancourt and Parks. The jawbone matched Healy's dental records. The killer dumped the women's bodies in this forested area east of Seattle. Local wildlife had then scavenged the remains and dispersed their bones across the wooded terrain. Although the police now had proof that the missing women had been murdered, they were still no closer to finding Ted. Five months later, in August of 1975, a highway patrol sergeant in Salt Lake City, Utah, noticed Ted Bundy's Volkswagen Bug speeding off from a parked position with no headlights on. Thinking it was suspicious, he decided to give chase and pull the vehicle over. When he pulled Bundy over and searched the Volkswagen, he found a bag containing a crowbar, ski mask and rope, among other tools. The sergeant presumed that he had pulled over a burglar. He had no idea that the bag was actually a murder kit and that the man standing before him had killed at least 17 young girls and women across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Colorado and Utah. Following Bundy's arrest, a detective noticed that he fit the description of a man who had attempted to abduct a teenager named Carl DeRonch from the Fashion Place Mall in Murray. By then, investigators in Washington had identified Bundy as a possible suspect in the killings and disappearances of several local women. In the aftermath of the Lake Sammamish abductions, the police released a sketch of Ted and details about his Volkswagen. Not long after, a number of people came forward to say that a young law student named Ted Bundy bore a resemblance to the sketch. He also drove a similar vehicle. It took some time before the authorities began to consider him a viable suspect, as they had no experience with serial killers. From their perspective, it seemed unlikely that a law student with no criminal history could be responsible for such crimes. When Bundy was linked to the failed kidnapping of DeRonch, investigators across several states immediately perked their ears up. From that point on, he became public enemy number one. Like most serial killers, Bundy was an impulsive creature. He didn't select victims and then stalk them for weeks on end. His crimes were far less elaborate than that. In most cases, he would go looking for a victim and then target whoever was accessible and available at that given time. Many authors have theorized that Bundy followed Healy back from the bar, as he was a regular patron at Dante's and O'Banion's. Although this is possible, it is also just as likely that he was prowling around her neighbourhood when he decided to target the house. For example, he may have noticed that the lights were on and went in for a closer look. Bundy's urge to engage in voyeurism became stronger whenever he was drinking alcohol, as it lowered his inhibitions and gave him Dutch courage. Bundy was a regular at Dante's Tavern and O'Banion's. When he left these bars after a night of drinking, it is possible that he roamed around the surrounding neighbourhoods, peering in windows and watching unsuspecting co-eds. Healy's house was a short walk away from Dante's. Therefore, it is plausible that he walked through her neighbourhood a number of times in the past. He may have even been aware that a group of young women were living in the house. Bundy theorized about his own crimes in third person while he was speaking to author Stephen Michaud. This allowed him to speak about the murders without actually confessing to them. While speaking about Healy's case, he said the killer had seen the house before and for some reason or another had been attracted to its occupants. Then one evening, just being in the mood so to speak, he checked out the house and found out that the front door was open. He thought about it, what kind of opportunity that offered, and returned to the house later on and entered the house and explored it. Then he went around the house and found a particular bedroom door that he opened. Really hit and miss, not knowing who or what, not looking for any particular individual, and that would be the opportunity. This was late at night and presumably everyone would be asleep. If Bundy was telling the truth, then it means that Healy's abduction was a crime of opportunity. This makes sense when you consider how risky it was for him to enter a residence with multiple occupants. It is unlikely that much planning went into such a brazen act. Instead, he was likely drunk and walking around the area when the house caught his attention. After lurking outside and observing the girls, he probed the exterior for an easy entry point. When he found one, he reasoned that the best strategy was to go home and then return with his vehicle in the middle of the night. Healy's room provided Bundy with an opportunity, as he could use the side entrance instead of carrying her out through the house. After entering her room, he crept up to her while she was sleeping and then struck her over the head with an object. The attack would have been quick and violent, as he wanted to avoid a situation where she woke up screaming. Once he was satisfied that Healy was unconscious, he carried her out the side entrance and loaded her into his vehicle. It is also possible that he bound her wrists in case she woke up during the journey. Before leaving the house, he made her bed, put her nightgown away, and took her clothes. Bundy did this to make it appear as though she had left on her own accord. By staging the crime scene, he was able to buy himself some time before the alarm was raised. Following the abduction, it is likely that he brought Healy to the forested area on Taylor Mountain. He chose this spot because he had hiked there a number of times and was familiar with the area. After assaulting Healy and murdering her, he left her body among the thick foliage and trees. Her clothes and belongings were most likely dumped down an embankment or thrown into a dumpster. In the days and weeks that followed, he would have returned to the site to see what was going on and possibly commit sex acts. During these visits, he noticed that animals were quick to scavenge the remains. In an interview with Stephen Michaud, Bundy likened Taylor Mountain to a garbage disposal unit. There, the little beasties, as he called them, would quickly destroy the evidence. Following Healy's murder, Bundy would have felt stressed and worried about the possibility of being linked to the crime. Like many serial killers, he may have initially promised himself that he would never do it again. Each day, he would read the newspapers to keep abreast of developments in the case. On one occasion, Bundy's girlfriend, Liz Cloffer, mentioned Healy's abduction as she lived just a few blocks away. In response, he told her to be aware at all times. He also advised her to fix a broken lock on her back door. In his words, the lock was dangerous. As the weeks passed and he realized that he had gotten away with murder, the urges began to build once again. At that point, Bundy's inner monologue would change. Instead of thinking, "I can never do that again," he would tell himself, "I can do it, as long as I don't get caught."